I'm not mistaken, Kathy Peck, I don't know that oh, you're recording. Okay, sorry, I said I have to use this. I don't really need it for y'all to hear me, but she said I had to use it to record, so anyway. Okay, anyway, Lenten gatherings this Wednesday at noon. I believe Kathy Peck, if my memory is correct, is going to be the guest presenter, so that should be enjoyable. We've had pretty decent turnouts, in fact, quite good turnouts for those, so come join us Wednesday. And then those of y'all that can stay, we've got a few cleanup projects we're doing around the church this morning, starting around 9:30, so we've got a little work day. So I want to, welcome some people we hadn't seen in a while. Mr. Ellis. Jim, it's good to have you back with us. It's been a long time. So we'll have to thank Mr. Erdman and Mr. Zimmerman. There he is, for making arrangements for getting Jim here with us. We've missed him, and we're blessed to have some of the ladies joining us this morning, and I think hopefully you'll find it maybe a little frightening but insightful presentation. We did this several years ago, and it's sort of stuck with me. Some of the problems. So we're updating and giving y'all an opportunity or to see what really goes on with the human trafficking thing here, and particularly here in Central Florida, it has become a problem. So. At this point, since we don't have any other announcements, I'm going to go ahead and ask Jay Fraxatus, who some of y'all recognize. Jay hadn't been around as much lately, but he's been a long-time member of the church, and he's back with us. Jay, you want to come? I'll let you introduce your friend. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chuck. I really appreciate it. I'm Jay Fraxatus, and as Chuck said, we've been members of this church for over 30 years. Lately, we were taking care of my wife's mom at home in hospice for several years, and that kept us from physically attending the church, although we continue to participate via video, which is great with online. The reason I'm here is interesting. I'm a writer as well as an attorney, and I recently published a novel called The Child of the Cloud Forest. It's my second novel. And it deals with human trafficking and migration. And I did a lot of research in connection with that, but I'm not an expert on human trafficking. And one of the church members, Dennis Stevenson, read the book and said, "Could you make a presentation?" I said, "Dennis, I'm not an expert. I'm a writer." And and actually it has a good ending. The victim gets away. She's very bright and successfully, and it's not hurt in any way. But having said that, I asked one of my former law partners if he knew anybody that was an expert in human trafficking, and my gosh, he got me one of the top experts in the country. Thomas Lares has been fighting human trafficking for 35 years. His organization is called United Abolitionists. He is one of the founders for the Center for the Study of Human Trafficking and Modern Slavery at the University of Central Florida. He has been all over the country fighting human trafficking, and he has deep knowledge in this area. So having said that, I am going to turn it over to him, and then we'll be happy to have to answer any questions after he finishes his presentation. Tomas?
Thank you, Jay, for the introduction and for the opportunity. Thank you to the church. Good to be here this morning. And like you said, Tomas Lars, and I am the founder and president of United Abolitionists to Stop Human Trafficking. And it is a 501c3 organization that was founded in 2009. But my journey on knowing about this heinous crime began many years before. It was in the early 90s that I went to, I came down. I'm originally from Michigan, from Grand Rapids, Michigan, and I came down right after high school to go to college in Lakeland. And my first job was Big Brothers, Big Sisters. And back then in the 90s, we didn't even know the word human trafficking. And so what we called when you heard about a parent selling their child for heroin, we called that child abuse or child neglect under the maltreatment code for the state of Florida. And so that's really, I was one of those rare people that went to college. My undergrad was psychology, and I actually got in the right profession and studied the right degree, which I know many of my friends that did not happen. They changed it, or they end up doing something else, right? That they find their passion. But I feel very blessed that I was able to, some of my first jobs were in child welfare. And I just began, I didn't know that God had really was preparing me for what I was about to enter into in my career, in my journey. And so throughout the 90s, was in child welfare. I did my internship with the Department of Children and Families, which back then was called HRS. And so after I had left college, I moved to Melbourne, Florida, and started working for a agency called Circles of Care, and they dealt with mental health issues and substance abuse. And I was placed because I was not a licensed clinical social worker. That was my goal. I started going to UCF for my master's in social work, but it ended up happening that I got a call a couple of weeks after working at Circles of Care saying, a social worker went on maternity leave, and we heard, Tomas, that you're a good social worker, even though you're not supposed to call yourself that until you actually have your license, a social service worker. And so I ended up on the unit, the Baker Act unit, when people are voluntarily brought when they're a threat to self or others, for the adults and the children. And folks, again, I started seeing people being brought in. You started hearing these stories that they were under somebody's control. Sometimes they couldn't even leave the house. And when you're dealing with the mental health community, a lot of times folks will just say, well, they must be having a psychotic episode, right? Or they're making this up. And so I kept hearing that as well for years and years, right? That these victims were not believed. We've seen that, right, in our society in general. We've come a long way. It used to be with domestic violence victims, the police would show up at the house, right, and just ask the woman, what did you do wrong, right, and tell the guy to take a walk around the block, right? And so that you can imagine domestic violence kind of has really gone before the issue of human trafficking. And there are some similarities with that power and control, right? There's that person that is really subjecting another person. And so today I just want to kind of give you an overview of what we're seeing here in Central Florida. So all these years later, I actually found out about the issue in 2004, so almost 22 years ago in July, that I was on a trip to DC. We had received a grant from the United Way of Brevard County to create community centers in Brevard so that families could come and learn parenting classes, anger management. We had a partnership with the Department of Children and Families and the community-based centers called the CBC. And so in that, again, we were seeing victims of trafficking in that child welfare work. On a trip to DC in July 2004, I met at the time, he was senator, then governor, and now ambassador, Sam Brownback from Kansas. And he said, Tomas, will you come to my meeting today? And I really feel, folks, that that was for me the divine appointment, that all those years prior, I was getting ready to learn about human trafficking. In that meeting that day in Washington, he was talking about human trafficking, and they called it modern slavery as well, and what was occurring in our nation. So I got back. I was still living in Melbourne. At that time, I had an organization, a nonprofit called Links of Hope, which was a prevention of child abuse agency out of Brevard. And I went to my board of directors and said, all this that we've been seeing with these kids being sold by their parents, all these, referrals we were getting from the Department of Children and Families, doing case management, I said, many of this is really human trafficking. It's not just child abuse. So they said, do your homework, Tomas. Find out in Florida what's going on. And so I did that. I found out that Florida had one of the first cases in the nation on human trafficking called the United States versus Tecum. It was out of the Fort Myers area where people were being brought from Central America, from Guatemala in particular, and were being forced in labor in South Florida. There were also some folks that were in domestic servants, actually, in homes, and also sex trafficking. And so I called, it was in Collier County, and I found the victim advocate who discovered the first case in January of 1999. And in this case, they got a call for a domestic violence report. They went to the property, and the victim spoke Spanish from Guatemala, and Anna, thank goodness, Anna spoke Spanish, and the victim said, I can't tell you what's going on because when they brought me here to the United States, they cut a piece of my hair and they sent a piece of my hair back to the witch doctor in my village in Guatemala. And if I talk, they said, or try to run, escape, I will die and my whole family will die. And so we started seeing the psychological manipulation, right, in games that these traffickers use. So Anna was wise, and she did a white lie. She came back the next day and said, I went to the local priest in town, and the curse has been broken. He did a prayer. And so the girl spoke, and it became the first case in the United States on modern slavery. Do you know they had to use the law from 1865 to convict the Tecum family? And so that alerted in Washington that there was a problem occurring of modern slavery. And so the next year, in 2000, President Clinton and Congress signed the Trafficking Victims Protection Act. And so that was, almost it'll be 26 years in October. But unfortunately, we know that there's bad actors, right? There's a demand. I'm going to talk about the demand today. Why is there human trafficking? Why does modern slavery still exist, right? In the 21st century, what's going on? And so in that time, 2004, I had one of the first seminars here. I brought Anna and the sheriff from Collier County. I also found the first university in the country that was already studying this issue was Florida State University. And I brought Professor Terry Coonan in from Tallahassee, and we had one of the first seminars way back then. And so that began to birth our task forces. So there's task forces now in every county in Florida. We just had a meeting 2 days ago with all the task forces, and that birthed the first one here in Central Florida. And so, long story short, I was volunteering at that time. Well, I had my child abuse agency in Brevard, and then I decided to move to Orlando, and I was excited to join the efforts here and found out there was none yet. And so I got with the FBI, with our vice unit called the Metropolitan Bureau Investigation, that's in Osceola and Orange County, through the sheriff and through the Orlando Police Department, and began our task force here that is now called the Central Florida Human Trafficking Task Force. So I say all that is that this has been a journey, folks. People thought I was crazy. They didn't believe that this was occurring in our own backyard, even though we had the victims and the stories, and we were seeing it daily, what was happening. And so that's what I want to just run through with you today, is what is occurring. When I founded as a first responder, all those years as a victim advocate, finally in 2009, I began the nonprofit. Friends were saying, Tomas, you need to organize what you're doing. This is great that you're volunteering for the FBI and the Vice Unit, but you need to start something. So I did. That's how United Abolitionists started. And I stayed really in that lane from day one to what I'm doing today, is being a first responder. So we started, we continue to work with federal, state, and local law enforcement. In fact, the latest big sting was called Operation Home for the Holidays this past fall with the U.S. Marshal's Office. And it was the biggest sting in the history of the country. And I really believe that's because we've learned a few things over the years in how to collaborate. 122 children were recovered. So that was the biggest one so far. So I've really stayed in that lane, folks, that first responder. The second thing was we were getting calls, right? And so we began a hotline called the Hope Line now to receive calls from potential victims, from law enforcement that may have picked somebody up on Orange Blossom Trail, or maybe on I-Drive at one of the hotels, or on 192. That's where we see a lot of activity. And so we have the Hope Line now as well, where victim advocates will answer those calls. Then we started seeing that when these victims were recovered, they sometimes hardly had the clothes on their back. We had a victim, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're doing at the Orlando International Airport, but we had a victim about 3 months ago, 14 years old, was sold to somebody in Orlando from Los Angeles. She's on the plane, American Airlines plane. They know something's off. 14 years old, by herself. She had basically one of those fancy bras, hot pants, sneakers, and sunglasses. That's all she had on her. And when she began to get questioned, she said, well, I'm meeting somebody in Orlando, and one-way ticket. And so we got alerted at the airport. The FBI was the main agency, and we're able to help that young lady. But literally, she just had that on. And so we have the Hope backpacks now. We keep in our vehicles, in our office, at the airport, at what we call a soft room at the airport. And so they have clothes, they have hygiene, if they're feminine products, if needed. Because we know once they're recovered and they end up going to a program, or maybe they have to go, get medical care, or even detox, because a lot of them are hooked on drugs by these bad actors. They have something now, at least to clean up and feel some kind of dignity. Our fourth thing there is with education, we have a training center. And because I had the first seminar here in Central Florida on the issue, we've really developed that training center. We have now LMS, a learning management system with modules. We have our virtual channel that really got birthed during the pandemic to do training, and in person like I'm doing today. And so I have a really great team for our trainers. So I know we're gonna have a conversation today, Jay, right, on what is the definition of human trafficking and how is it different from similar crimes, prostitution. Do you want to say anything before?
No. That is a question.
Okay.
We need to know the difference.
Yes, so remember I stated that human trafficking is different than domestic violence, even though there's commonalities, sexual assault or child abuse, right? All those exploitations and abuse have their own definition of that abuse or exploitation. Where it becomes human trafficking is because now somebody's going to profit from that. So there's a commercial profit for abusing somebody. So it may be, even if they're sexually assaulted, if somebody got paid, usually that bad actor, right, that trafficker or locally pimps will be paid, so they have, and folks, look how these people think. Here in the United States, we don't call it a brothel. They call it a stable. What do you think when you hear the word stable? Animals, right? Horses. That's literally, right now in the streets, the name they call it. They'll say, I have a stable full of girls or boys. What would you like? Blonde hair, blue eyes. So they're literally being branded as property. That's literally the wording and the language they're using. And so human trafficking is different because there's that commercial, right, profit. And it may not even be money necessarily. We've had so many young people. Florida has over 40,000 young people that run away a year, right? So they may run away from the foster care system, a group home, maybe a family that's struggling. And between 48 and 72 hours, one of these bad actors is finding them. At the bus station, we train Lynx buses now. We have that contract to train all the bus drivers. And we have signage now and the different bus stops and on the buses. And we've had reports. People are being recruited, right, these young people. And so within that short period of time, they are meeting someone. And some people are being trafficked because they just need somewhere to sleep, right? They say, or they're hungry for a cheeseburger, in one case. If I give you food, then you have to do this now, right? And then that's where that whole thing comes in. Now you owe me, right? And then eventually I own you. So that's how that's happening here. It is not so much of the snatch and grab that still happens. It's a very small percentage where, you heard about the white van, right, and somebody snatching somebody or taking somebody from a neighborhood. That still happens. Those are usually the serial killers or the very sick perverts. But with human trafficking, they're trying to build some kind of connection and relationship with them. The FBI calls them Romeo pimps. Romeo pimps. And this is exploding. We're going to talk a little bit about it more online than ever before. And so how is it different as well from smuggling? We know that right now we hear a lot about immigration. So just think of this. Smuggling is a crime against our borders, right? Somebody is brought in that doesn't have permission. Human trafficking is a crime against a person. And so that person, there's a lot of immigrants that have been smuggled into the United States, and when they get here, they're not released. They're said, now you owe $10,000 more. So they get into what's called debt bondage. That's happening a lot. And so then it becomes human trafficking because they're threatened. You cannot leave. You'll be harmed. Your family will be harmed. For example, back in Mexico or Guatemala. And so they take these threats serious because in a lot of these countries, these bad actors will fulfill their promise. And so that's what we're seeing. So there's a difference between, right, human trafficking and smuggling. Next question. So this is the definition. And look, the three key words are force, coercion, and fraud, right? When we're talking about the recruitment and grooming of human trafficking. And that's one of our, that's the United Nations law that the United States law and many of the nations reflect. So what type of trafficking are there? All right, and so anybody can be trafficked. Obviously, a lot of these young people that are getting lured, they're looking for love in all the wrong places, right? And who doesn't want love and acceptance? Right, that's something that God put in each of us, right, for relationship. And so, again, they're not being snatched and grabbed. Most of them, of the victims we see today, they've met somebody and they think they're in love, especially these young people now on all the social media. It's unbelievable. It's very scary, actually. I believe there needs to be more laws to protect the young people. And I've been thinking of at certain ages that they should even have access to meeting people from all over the world, right on their telephone, right? They say now, the FBI says that the most dangerous place in America is a young person with a smartphone alone in their bedroom. That's the most dangerous place now in America. Why? Because that's where all the recruiting is happening right now. They're meeting somebody thinking that's their boyfriend or girlfriend. It's really one of these bad actors. They're telling them, again, you're beautiful. The traffickers even have said that in one of the interviews that I have heard was every morning they'll send a direct message on one of the social media channels to 100 different girls saying you're beautiful. They get these random text message, right, and direct messages, and whoever responds is who they target to recruit. So again, they're looking for those vulnerabilities. And a lot of it's psychological, and a lot of it's just looking for that love and acceptance. So as we see, it can happen to anyone, right? A kind of homeless family. We've had cases in Winter Park. But this is across our globe, sex trafficking, labor trafficking, forced marriages, of course, mostly in other countries, but it has happened here. That debt bondage I referred to, and also organ trafficking. There's also, in some definitions, child soldiers, children that are being forced in certain countries. So this is the landscape of the 50 million slaves or people being trafficked in the world right now that is being tracked. So why do you think people are most surprised to learn about human trafficking in our communities? You know, a lot of times, if you don't see something, right, you maybe not think it's happening, or if it doesn't affect you directly. And I think that's where these horrible recruitment and grooming, and I'm going to go into a couple of specific stories today, are happening all around us. And the scary thing, folks, is the number one growth of human trafficking is called familial trafficking. Again, remember I referred to you that of the parents selling their kid for heroin? So we are happening that in our own community right now. A lot of parents that are being prosecuted because one survivor that speaks out now, Savannah out of Apopka, her mom was selling her at 11 years old for $10 an hour. And the mother would get drugs or whatever with that. But that is happening now more than ever. And again, if it doesn't happen in our families, right, or in our church, it's almost unbelievable. But these are the kind of cases we're seeing. And so it's increasing because of demand. There wouldn't be human trafficking if there wasn't a demand. So that could be for either, when it comes to labor trafficking, right, people are wanting cheap products, maybe. But for sex trafficking, there's a demand for that. And I believe it's really a sign of the times, even, with the growth of the pornography and all these things. You know, a lot of these folks, 10 buyers, ex-buyers were recently interviewed by a friend of mine who did a documentary, which I need to send you, called Buying Her, Jay, that they all the common thing they had was they all got addicted to pornography. And then from there, they started thinking of these fantasies and fetishes. And not everyone who looks at pornography is going to start buying, but many do. And it became an addiction, right? So it didn't matter who. They even knew some of them were minors. They knew many of them were being sold. They had a trafficker or a pimp. And they said it was so powerful, that addiction, that they couldn't stop. So that demand is fueling this as well when it comes to that sex trafficking. So I want us to remember that. The University of South Florida and Tampa and St. Pete have now, under statute of the state, we're one of the first states to mandate what does trafficking look like in our state. So in 2017, Senator Nelson, right before he got out of office, he invited me to D.C., and I was able to testify before the Senate on what does human trafficking look like. And all the senators, you know what the number one question was? What are the real numbers? What does it look like in our state, right? Who has the most? And nobody could answer that because no state was making it mandatory to collect that data. In fact, in Florida, before the University of South Florida was tasked with this, you had to call every single judicial circuit and ask. And sometimes they would tell you or cooperate, and many times they wouldn't, you know. And those are just the ones that are being prosecuted. Then you had to call all 67 sheriffs to say, okay, what's going on in your county? And you can imagine we used to put interns to do this, some law students, and they hated us for it, but we were able to collect at least some data. Now the University of South Florida is doing it, and look at that, 200,000 in that last fiscal year. Their fiscal year starts on July 1st, so the new report will come out July 1st for 2025 in Florida. 200,000.
Is that the shocking thing that we don't know that?
Yes, yeah. Exactly, because now everyone's mandated to give them all the stats of what they're seeing, the cases. And so what's even more scary, and I don't think it's on here, it might be that 340,000, that was the ads just in Jacksonville. Was it Duval County? Is that what Jacksonville County is? The ads, sex ads just in that county. Look at that. In 1 year. Just in one county. And folks, many of you have seen Sheriff Grady Judd in Polk County. He's one of the most outspoken. He just asked us to be part of the next sting operation, by the way, which we're going to participate with him. That he's one of the only sheriffs that are really exposing this. And think about just a little Polk County, when they do these stings, there's hundreds, so many times, identified. And so Florida, the reason Florida is so vulnerable is because obviously we're one of the fastest growing states, right? We have a booming tourist population. A lot of people come to Florida even though it's supposed to be family friendly. It's like Vegas, right? What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, right? And so people have that mentality. Our sporting events are exploding and growing. I was a part of the first Super Bowl outreach on human trafficking in 2009 with the FBI because they started noticing at these big sporting events or big conventions that there was an explosion of sex trafficking that was happening. And it wasn't the majority of the good fans. It was those bad apples that were coming and these bad actors, these traffickers and pimps that knew that there was a demand. And so, for example, in 2009, there used to be, well, I think they still have the Craigslist online where you could buy lawn furniture or anything. Back then, they used to have adult personal ads. So in 2009, the FBI was looking at that. And in Tampa, the week of the Super Bowl, there was like the week before, there was like 300 and something of those ads. Do you need a massage? Do you need a companion? The problem was many of these individuals were minors, right? They would lie and say they're 18. The week of Super Bowl, there was over 3,000. So what changed in a week? Well, the Super Bowl was in town, and so there was a demand. And so that was the first one in the world. Now every sporting league is now doing outreach and awareness on trafficking, including FIFA, which I was a part of that committee for Florida, as they come to Miami, mainly this year. So they're looking at why is there an increase? And again, it's that demand. So think about the sex ads in just one county. It's kind of unbelievable, right? And what are they? They're all these different websites, right? That there's multiple now. And so people will go on there and want to purchase someone. And that's not including what they call the dark web, right? That's the www web. The whole dark web is a whole nother story. Very, very, very scary and very ugly stuff on there. Next question, what are some of the most common misconceptions about human trafficking? I think we have some of the myths here. Trafficking targets strangers, right? I mentioned that. When the fact is most victims are trafficked by somebody they know, or they think they know. Like I was saying, these young people, they meet somebody on Instagram or Facebook, and now, their boyfriend and girlfriend in a couple hours. They think they know them. Think about that. A lot of these profiles are fake. In fact, the traffickers are now targeting the boys in the gaming. Like the kids are into this gaming thing. I don't know if your children, grandchildren are. Last game I played was Pac-Man. So now they're playing all these different games that are very sophisticated. Well, in those games, they create a community across the world, right? So they have their earphones on. Some of them have the new virtual reality thing. They're in their bedroom all night, right, these kids. Well, we had a case where a 12-year-old boy here in Central Florida was on one of these games. For months, he thought he met another 12-year-old from another state. And one day, they play these games together, and it becomes really their new community, especially the kids that are loners or maybe being bullied in school. So it's very vulnerable. They're chatting, they're playing these games for hours. And this other supposed peer says to him one day, out of months of playing every day and building a relationship, and trust. So it's somebody they know. Says, my family's coming to Florida to go to the parks, but we want to see you. I want to see you, but don't tell your parents. So that's the big red flag, isn't it? Well, of course, thank goodness, actually, the young man's father was in law enforcement, and he went to his dad and said, hey, this is strange. My friend wants to see me, but he doesn't want me to tell you. And the dad did an investigation, and it was really a 51-year-old man, pedophile from Wisconsin. It wasn't a 12-year-old boy. So they're making fake profiles. Now with the AI, right, the artificial intelligence, they can even, the voice, you can even talk to somebody and think it's another age, video, you name it. So this is exploding right now. Myth is only girls and women are trafficked, and that's a myth. The fact is boys and men are equally victimized and underreported. So the study that USF did is looking about 30% of the victims are boys. But boys and men don't report often like any crime, right? Whether they're raped or other, because of how we're made as men, right? It's shameful, guilty. Something may have happened to them that was even maybe a homosexual thing and they're heterosexual. In fact, there's a case that's probably going to the Supreme Court, Jay, from the Haba law firm here in Longwood. And Lisa Haba, the attorney, she has 2 clients that were 14-year-old boys, and there's an app called Snapchat, and it's a thing where it's whatever you say or do disappears, supposedly forever, within a minute or seconds. These 2 boys met, supposedly now another 14-year-old girl, and they actually saw a girl, who knows if it was really AI, and she said, if you want to see my breasts, take your shirts off. And it went from there. And these 2 boys identify as heterosexual, but she had them kissing and then oral sex, and she got naked and did stuff to herself. All that, well, that happened on Snapchat. So they thought, oh, haha, fun, right? These 14-year-old boys, right? Who wouldn't want to see maybe a peer, right, in their hormones. Well, they ended up, months passed, a year, almost 2 years. They go into their high school here in Central Florida, and they walk in the school and everyone's laughing. And they said, what's going on? They said, we saw your porn video on Twitter last night. And they said, we've never done porn, or we're not on Twitter. They showed them, it was that whole Snapchat incident. They had recorded everything and sold it to a porn company. The boys were devastated. The parents were called. They went to the principal's office. They immediately called Twitter. I know I'm supposed to say X, but I'm just used to saying Twitter, sorry. And they said, these are minors, so they were still minors. And they were minors when they did this video. Please take this down now. Twitter said, well, you have to prove that they're minors. So the parents had to send their birth certificate. The principal had to send their IDs. Well, they finally said, okay, you're minors, they are minors. Now we have to look into our policies and procedures if this was a violation. 9 days later, almost 200,000 people, including the whole school, you know how children are, they airdropped it on anybody who had an iPhone, the video, so that anybody in the school who had that iPhone saw the video. They're humiliated, suicidal. Well, one of our judges here said, Twitter, you're the trafficker, because every click you made money, right? So now our traffickers are turning digital, folks. This is what's really scary that's happening right now. Then it went to another circuit, and that circuit said, well, you're okay because of Section 230 that was written in 1996 to protect the World Wide Web from lawsuits. You have free speech, and that's not, you didn't promote this Twitter. Somebody used your platform to do it. Well, then it got appealed again, and it's going to the Supreme Court. Because we believe that if someone's making millions of dollars, tens of millions on children being exploited, that's not free speech. That's not protecting the internet, right, from frivolous lawsuits. And so I'll be looking out for this case. It was just an announcement Friday that they're asking the Supreme Court to take the case. But this will set a precedent in our country, right? That you cannot become a multimillionaire, which is happening with other sites. There was one called Backpage.com that got censored, one of the first websites, because it was similar to what was happening in Craigslist. By the way, Craigslist, there was a big protest that year after the Super Bowl in 2010, and they censored themselves. Backpage, which got censored in 2017, they refused. They're making $22 million a year on putting these awful ads, but they got shut down. They're owned by the Village Voice in Manhattan. So we see some of the myths and the facts here. All trafficking involves sexual exploitation. That's a myth. Trafficking also involves forced labor, child recruitment, and domestic servitude. I think I mentioned that. Myth, trafficking always involves movement across borders, and we went through that, right? It's not smuggling. That's a different crime. And it can occur without, right? It's occurring in a child's bedroom. Last one is trafficking is a problem only in developing countries. No, every country that reports to the State Department, I think every country has reported except like North Korea, Iran, but most of the countries are part of the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, which includes the abolition of slavery and trafficking. Every nation is reporting cases and an issue.
This is so fascinating, and there's so much that
Yeah.
we don't know.
Yes.
I mean, that we're just opening a little window to it. Maybe we can have some questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
At this point, because I know there's
Yes.
so much data. And one of the things that I noticed what you said, and I was aware of that, is that these porn sites, the dollars, the money that is involved, because I was tangentially, as a
Yeah.
mediator, involved in a case, and we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars that are involved in
Yep.
I mean, no one, it's not a little thing, it's huge. And we're just
Correct.
beginning, but I'd like to open it to questions.
Sure.
'Cause there's lots
I can talk all day, so. Yes, sir.
Traffickers, when they are prosecuted, how much time do they get?
Great question. So if it's involving a minor, they can get life in prison now. That's where it's gone. So that's a great thing because, yeah. You know, somebody who's raped or molested one time, life can be altered forever. Think of somebody the average is being sold 10 times a day to different persons. So think of that trauma. The survivors that we work with and that are successful now, maybe they got their education, are thriving, are not the same. They all tell me that. They have night terrors. Some are married with children and a great life now, maybe a part of a church fellowship. But it is devastating. So if they're 18 and over, the case, it just depends on the circuit or the judge or the jury. Yeah. Yes, sir.
I wonder if part of the problem in seeking justice with this incredible problem worldwide is, well, for America, our judicial gridlock. The federal judiciary alone is just jammed with one problem after another.
Correct.
There's the old saying that we're all familiar with: justice delayed is justice denied. The other aspect of this, which is troubling to me, is you mentioned that the FBI is involved. Forgive me for wondering about how that works with Cash Patel being in charge of the FBI, working for a person at the top who has been accused himself of being involved with young girls.
Yep.
So, I mean, the whole situation is so surreal.
Yeah.
And it's out of control. But the other dimension of this is the fact of the matter is, in our culture, too often in the past half century, money is our god. Money is our god. The other problem, and that's, I don't know if you heard that, but I think one of the big problems, and you would agree, Tomas, is that the technology that you pointed out is so far ahead of the legal system.
Absolutely.
I mean, the laws, as you said, free speech,
Yep.
and I'm a lawyer, the legal system and the courts are dragging behind what's actually happening in the real world at light speed. I mean, that I think is one of the problems we're seeing, because
Yep.
our systems are very good, and they were founded back during the Enlightenment in the 1700s, the 1800s. We don't have a rapid legal system. It just doesn't work that way. I mean, this is my 50th year of law practice, and things go way too slow, and there's too few courts, frankly, to handle it.
Absolutely, and that's the issue, because so the two things are, I think there's a cultural complicity, and we've all seen that manifested with the Jeffrey Epstein files, of what a circus that turned into, and even with what happened here in Florida, right, in 2007, 2008, where he was was convicted of trafficking minors, and had the most incredible deal ever, right? Where he could go to the office or home or whatever. It was never, someone was never given that privilege, I don't think, in the system. And what's interesting is, obviously, one of the things that's been said is they didn't want the Epstein files revealed because there'd be a lot of people exposed, which is what happened, right? And even if it happened years ago. So that shows me, the Patriots owner, Robert Kraft, was caught in South Florida on video at a massage parlor. And he basically got a slap on the wrist. I think if you're a billionaire, you probably have a good attorney, right, Jay? And so everything was thrown out, right, all the evidence. And a lot of these folks in Florida we're seeing, buying somebody, doing horrific things, sexual assault, they're getting a misdemeanor if it's 18 and over. So the children, there's more consequence, and disorderly conduct. And so we're saying, okay, just because she's 18 now, yesterday she was 17 and he would have got life in prison. Today she's 18 and it's a misdemeanor in community service? What happened? Yes, sir.
Do law enforcement agencies have specially trained personnel to dig out this?
Great question. Most do, but it's one or two. And so, for example, in our circuit, the biggest one is MBI, right, the Metropolitan Bureau of Investigation, that multi-jurisdictional agency. But like Homeland Security has a handful, FBI has a handful, U.S. Marshals. So everyone is really struggling right now, because I've been in their offices, the cases are piled.
One of my nieces was actually in one of those units in Miami-Dade. She's sergeant in Miami-Dade on human trafficking. And I've talked to her recently. In fact, she was giving me a lot of information before I got hold of Tomas, and they were overwhelmed, beyond overwhelmed. In fact, she's now away from that because she could not take the pressure of, there's so much, it is, the greatest thing we have is ignorance. I mean, I think we're not aware of the magnitude that we're facing, and I think this is why it's important, Tomas, that churches and other community service systems are aware. I mean, we have ignorance. I mean, I wasn't aware, even just talking briefly with Tomas, how overwhelming the problem is, and our laws and our courts, and as I said, I've been an attorney for 50 years, are behind the rapid growth of this horrible crime. And one of the things that Tomas pointed out is, it doesn't matter what happens the rest of their life, they are harmed forever. I mean, they are psychologically devastated, and I've seen that in many of the cases. So.
Well, one of the examples, too, we just had Friday, so Circuit 9, Orange County, Osceola, has the only diversion program right now in Florida for these victims. So if they were, a lot of them, have to steal, right, when they're being trafficked, or be a drug mule. So they get caught, right? So they got felonies and all that. So I went to, way back, when state attorney, it started with Jeff Ashton. and said, we need to do something for these victims because they were under duress while they're trafficking, and now they can't get an apartment, they can't move on with their life, right? It's miserable, right? And they were trafficked. And being trafficked is verified, right? It's just not anybody can come out and say, I've been trafficked or this, right? There's a huge process to verify it. And so our circuit, it took a long time, but now it's up and running where we have a diversion program. But what I was told first was, well, there's no money, Tomas. So if you want to do this, you're gonna have to do it for free. You have to create the whole program. You have to recruit all the trainers. And so we did. United Abolitionists stepped up. We pay for everything now. So not even our county, so no government money is going into the only diversion program in Florida. Think about that. Now they're getting all the credit for it, but the point is that we're doing the right thing to help these ladies and men. So we had 11 on Friday graduate, but I've seen hundreds now, and so it is very behind. They don't want to put any money behind it, and so it's a really how do you say it? There is a miscarriage of justice for what's happening right here in our own backyard.
And there's also profound ignorance. I mean,
Absolutely,
about
yes,
the size of it.
yes, sir.
I have two questions. First, how do we educate and protect our grandkids and the kids in this church? And secondly,
Yes.
as we go about on travel, what suspicious behavior should we look for and report that might be human trafficking?
Great. Yeah. Let's go ahead. Yep. Let's move forward on this. And we're going to look here with so some of the things, so for the kids, right, that sudden behavior change, right, that's always a red flag. And as we talk to teachers, educators, as well as social workers, when a child was a good child doing their work and then something happens, right, there's something in the home that happened. Maybe the parents are having issues. Maybe there's abuse. Maybe they're being trafficked. Unexplained money and gifts, this is big. So this is very scary too. We have gone to the middle schools, and a lot of these kids are, and the resource officers and folks tell us they come to school on Monday with a Gucci bag or Louis Vuitton, and they live in poverty. So those are all started to be red flags of, okay, what's going on here? So,
Two cell phones, right?
yeah, somebody is buying these things for them, right? So there could be unexplained money gifts, controlling of older relationships. Again, a lot of times there's, again, that power control, right? Withdrawal from church or family. So again, those are red flags. Something's going on with that child. Maybe they're being bullied, or maybe they could be being trafficked. And these traffickers have done what the drug traffickers have done too. They're putting recruiters. So I just heard this on Saturday, where a girl that was in a program, so Bridging Freedom is one of the biggest safe houses in Florida for minors being recovered on human trafficking. They're out of Pasco County. That one of the survivors said, I had a choice to work for Chick-fil-A for $12 an hour or make $1,000 a day. Think about that. Being 15, 16 years old. And so in their minds, right, they're not developed. Are you going to work for basically minimum wage? Or, I don't make $1,000 a day. Who does, right? So these are the kind of things that are happening, is that they're being, this is part of, I think, we ask, why aren't they running from this, right? Why aren't they calling the police? And I believe these, they're being manipulated and brainwashed and given things, which a lot of times they don't get to keep all the money, by the way. Then you find that out as well, right? They just not got the Louis Vuitton or Gucci purse or other things.
That was a great question.
What do we teach the kids to look forward? This is what we teach the parents.
Yes.
How do we reach the kids and tell them?
So in Orange County, we have the new Commission on Human Trafficking by the school board. Paving the Way Foundation is the chair, Jan Edwards, and they're going into all the schools here, age appropriate. So elementary is one curriculum, middle school is one, and high school. But I would recommend that they're going in and equipping the students on what to look for. So the schools are inviting them in, and private and public, on somebody's how they're being recruited online of what I mentioned. The boys with gaming, the girls on social media. And so Paving the Way Foundation, you can Google that as well and look at they have all those tools, things that you can put.
Children are being, the students.
Educated,
taught
yes.
To look for these signs, which was your question.
Yep,
And one more question.
yes.
I appreciate you bringing up the gaming and kids are communicating with sex traffickers and they don't realize that.
Correct.
My grandson, I witnessed this weekend, he was playing a game and he was communicating with somebody else. And so I'm going to bring that up to my son.
Yep.
He's a way of education. He's only 9 years old.
Yeah.
And also, are there ways that we can identify people just on the street that we think there's suspicious symptoms or whatever, that we can refer them to a hotline?
Yes, I'm going to,
Reach out to them in a way that's safe.
I think we have one of those slides of that. So we say, please don't confront the traffickers, right? If you see something, people have seen something, right? You see something, say something. We're asking that you get a license plate if something looks suspicious, right? Making the call can be anonymous too, right? It's better nothing's wrong, right? And you're wrong, or maybe somebody's being recovered or rescued. And so first of all, do not attempt to confront or rescue, right? You could put yourself in danger. This is the National Human Trafficking Hotline we partner with, and they're 24/7, and so we get calls when it's in our region from them saying, somebody just called, there's a victim at the Days Inn on 33rd Street and John Young Parkway, she wants help, or somebody's identifying some of these suspicious behaviors. So please make the call. If it's imminent, call 911. Saying, I just saw, it looks like a girl, something's not right, this is the license plate, this is the car, right, model, color. Again, rather be wrong or, maybe somebody would be saved. If you see something in a neighborhood, you could also report that, something suspicious, maybe people coming in all hours of the day and night. This isn't, this is not a business here, it's a residential place. So those are some of the things you can do. Again, folks, I could literally be here 3 days. We just are scratching the surface. I haven't talked about the hospitality tourism industry in Florida, kind of all the prevention that's occurring, intervention, all the therapeutic programming we're seeing. There's just so many aspects of this. Yeah.
There's a great deal, and I know time is short, Chuck.
Are you working with the hotels?
Yes. Absolutely, yes. So I helped write the law in Florida, House Bill 851 in 2018, that made it mandatory for the hotel and lodging to do a 1-hour training a year for their employees. We also have the contract at the with GOA at the airport for the 25,000 employees, and we're training the hotels, the airlines, all the employees there as well. So.
You may have alluded to this, but I think I look at the education system and see that kids spend a great chunk of their waking hours in schools. And are the trainings being done? You talk a lot about law enforcement training and
Yep.
hotel, other things. Are they being done with educator or school systems?
So there's a rule in Florida that every school district had to do 1 hour a year. And usually in their health classes, they just made, the law just passed the last session where all the staff of the school staff, social worker, nurses, they have to be trained as well. But for the students themselves, it's whoever wants to take that up at the school to do 1 hour a year. So there's a lot of work in advocacy. One more questions or comment?
Wonder about, although you actually touched on it in all the commentary, the correlation between sex trafficking and the mayhem that it creates to wealth, family wealth, and influence. And to make that more graphic, so just a question out of the blue. So what would be the incidence of sex trafficking in a population of Winter Park versus Pine Hills,
Yeah.
if you get my drift? So to me, it's just as a comment now, a lot of this is the horrific impact of wealth, income, and inequality, which has worsened very much so over the past 50 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, and dislocation that comes
Yep.
with lack of wealth. I mean, you're right. A stable church, family, and so forth, you're less likely, I would imagine. But if you're dislocated, parents living in different places, or divorces, or, just family breakup, that's a
Yeah.
big
Well, I think that goes into the whole. That's a whole nother seminar we could do on that aspect. Yes.
We've got a lot, yeah.
Wow, this sort of scrambles the mind a little when you start to see and hear. We had a presentation on this done about 4 or 5 years ago, and you've brought up so many new things that have opened a whole panacea of opportunities for people to take advantage of it, mainly the internet. At the time, the gentleman did the presentation before, it was mainly the one you talked about. I can show you how to make $1,000 a day instead of $12 an hour, and now that may be a minor thing compared to this internet interactions, and that's scary. That's frightening to me. But anyway, we could spend a whole bunch of time. I did want to say that the United Methodist Men, not much we can do physically perhaps, but we would like to support and make a contribution to your organization to help you hopefully accomplish some of the things that we know need to be done very, very, very badly. And we appreciate everything you and Jay have done and continue to do. And if there's stuff at the small level, like Larry brought up, here at the church, we see kids, and how do we identify them? And not just once you identify, what do you do? How can you help? So there's a long way we can go. Okay.